Good evening. It is Monday, the 16th of March, 2026. Just gone 9 p.m. UK time. And this is part of my journey, show 65. Each time I do one of these, I'm like, wow, 65 shows. There's been a lot of guests on this show since March 2021 when we started with Double P and Mr. Musto. We talked about all sorts of things to do with mental health. We've talked about music. We talked about 45s. We talked about DJ scene. And my guest tonight is someone who I've only relatively recently got to connect with. I spoke with Dan, Mr. Big Mouth, on the 45-day Global Funk Fam show, and I was gutted because I couldn't make it down to the Unstoppable DJ battle in December. But I'd seen that they've been putting on the Scratch Cafe in Bristol, and I went to uni in Bristol, so obviously it's always an interest for me to see what's going on down there. And I reached out, and Oliver Gould, who's the guest, said he'd have a great time talking about lots of things that have been through his life that are important for other people to hear, especially through mental health and addiction and things like that. So here he is. Hi, how you doing?
Very well, and you, Criztoz? How about you?
Yes, I'm good, man. I'm knackered as usual because just like you, I'm sure loads of stuff going on, but it's all good and it's all positive, and it's just keeping the energy going. Here he is. Mr. Big Mouth is in there already saying he can't stay, but have a great show.
He's just complaining as always about not having any time. You've got too much on. Boo-hoo. Yeah, that's all I hear from him.
Nice one. Right. So first time on the show, I always like to speak to my guests and find out who first got this passion for music into their lives. So for you, from a young age, who was it? Was it parents, brothers, sisters, friends? Who got you into music?
Right. So my dad's bass player. My mum was always quite musical, but I also grew up in a well-known pub in Bristol called the Chelsea, which was called the Clarence House when in the 80s, and my old man ran that. My bedroom was above the pub, so you'd have like all the reggae sound system guys in, you'd have all the bands. So I was just surrounded by drunk music people from a very young age. With because it was a pub, we had the music TV up there as well. So I got to see music videos at a really young age as well. So yeah, music, might seeing my dad's bass guitar, seeing my dad play gigs, being in a pub with music. Music's just been the sort of answer for nearly every problem I've ever had for a very young age. So yeah, music's quite an important thing.
Was there any particular style that you were drawn to at that time, or were you just into everything?
There's been a theme that's followed through my life really, and styles, genre and such has never really been that important to me, and it hasn't really rung clear to me. And I've always pondered this tribalism that happens with people and their styles and their types of music, because music's music for me, and I categorize music really with speed, rhythm, and what's actually happening in the music. I don't really call it these names. And then about 10 years ago, I found out that the genre was actually invented by the rock and roll boys to be able to sell the music easily. Style really, it doesn't factor. It's not a thing. It's just something that the businessmen use to be able to sell it easily to teenagers.
Fair enough. So from being surrounded by music, does there come a point where you start sort of buying music in terms of records?
The first 3 pieces of music that I bought when I was 11, and I can't remember what shop it was in, but I bought them on tape in about 92, and it was the Nightcrawlers, Push the Feeling On. It was Living Joy Dreamer and the Clash's Greatest Hits. Right. And I bought those on tape with the first bit of money I had. I think it was about 11. So yeah, music's been an extremely important part of my life. Obviously, my dad had a record collection when I was younger. He had record players, so he'd be, playing things like The Police and Dire Straits and Kraftwerk and sort of Malcolm McLaren's Madam Butterfly. There's a really eclectic sort of basis understanding of music and music to us. So yeah, I've been very blessed to have quite a large exposure to music. And then there was a breakdown in my mother and my dad's relationship, and then my mother found a new partner, and that's my stepdad Mark, and he was well into his punk. So in about 1989, right, I was listening to Sex Pistols albums and The Clash and Joy Division, and then obviously Warsaw albums from before that. So yeah, my music has been extremely eclectic, and then obviously my mum's influence, which was sort of Fleetwood Mac. It's just, I've listened to everything for a long time.
Fantastic. So you're obviously buying cassettes for the very first time.
Yeah.
Did you have like a Walkman, or did you have like a hi-fi system that you were listening to this stuff into?
So we had a Walkman. Obviously there was a sound system in the pub, and I was live music in the pub. So yeah, it was, there was decent quality hi-fi. There was live music. There was a Walkman. There was a lot. Me and my brother became quite obsessed with Walkmans in school. Ally real thin Walkmans in the 90s. I wore the thin black curvy Panasonic. It was the first introduction to curvy things that meant something to us before we sort of grew hair and got into women. Do you know?
Yeah. Amazing stories. Okay, so that's cassettes.
Yes.
Obviously, we're talking about 45s on this show quite a lot, but a vinyl is obviously a big part of it, and obviously I can see
Yeah.
decks behind you. So when's it come that you start sort of collecting vinyl?
So I've never really collected vinyl per se. So when I first heard rave music in like 91, it was a DJ side West Point set from the New Year's Eve 1991 to 1992. Some kids we knew had the tape from an older brother and he played it, and I was like, what the hell is this? All of the aim and breaks and all of those real famous think breaks just sped up, and all of these really high pitched noises and these weird like scratch noises DJ Sy used to make. And I thought that was a sort of orchestra on stage. So in my little brain, for about 3 or 4 years, I thought that was actually a performance that happened amongst a load of musicians, like some real cool orchestra. Do you know what I mean? And
Right.
then suddenly, I don't know how I found out. I think I went to senior school and some guy was like doing it, and he told me, "Oh no, there's these record players, and they push them with their fingers to make them go fast enough," which was obviously probably true in the late 70s. But he'd seen a video or been to a rave and saw some guy speeding up and slowing down the record. So suddenly I was like, "Oh shit, this is just a DJ, isn't it?" But because it wasn't, "Oh yeah, now we're paying Dire Straits money for nothing. Oh, the next tune will be this, Radio One. Stop. It was actually an amalgamation of these records, and I found out that it was actually vinyl that these guys were using to manipulate and create long play sets with. And the moment I realized that, I was like, right, where do I get these from? And then remembered there was this record shop in town called Replay Records, which was one of the predominant record shops in Bristol. And this was when it was underneath the sort of bus station. The first Replay Records in about 96, 95, 96. And then just bought them. So, and it was a tool. Suddenly I had these musical tools that I could not only manipulate, but I could mix with other musical tools. Records have never really been a collection for me, and music's never been really a collection for me. It's been a tool. It's been something I've used to either alter my state of mind, or it's been something I've used to pass time, or it's been something I've used to sharpen my dexterity or my ability to recognize or manipulate music. So yeah, it's the concept of collection has only happened in my older days because I'm not off my nut smashing records up in sets. These appear there now because I like listening to them, and they're less of a performance tool now, and they're more of a sort of listening tool now. But yeah, I'm not precious about any of them really. But if they did go, I'd cry for a little bit, but I'd be over it quite fast when I got some more. So yeah, the word collecting doesn't really exist in my mind,
No, that's
really.
cool. That's cool. Using them as a tool, exactly, in terms of DJ. You're picking them up from Replay, and I think, 96, that would have been when I was in Bristol as well. So I've definitely been there around that same sort of time.
Yeah.
What are you using? Have you got your own setup at home? Have you got Technics?
I didn't have Technics then. I had I saved up on a paper round and bought a set out of one of the DJ magazines you picked up. I think me and my brother picked it up from Hard to Find Records. We used to sneak up to Birmingham to Hard to Find Records without telling mum, and we'd go and buy all these like bootleg records. And there was a magazine in there. We took the magazine back, and there was these decks that were advertised, or the picture was a 1200, but they were quite a lot cheaper. So I saved up on a from my paper round, my like £5 a week paper round. My mum has seen I've been saving. She was like, "Okay, well, you've saved this month, we'll double it." And then got my first set of, I can't remember what they were. They weren't even Sound Labs. They were just these really poorly designed decks. I can't remember what they're called. They were awful. I mean, I knew they were awful when I bought them. But before that, I had a direct drive turntable. I can't remember what it was. I nicked it off my stepdad, I think, and I just scratched the records I had. They were belt drive. They were awful. But like a lot of people my age, we came up hard. We really enjoyed the blessing of an SL 1200 when we got the chance to go on one.
When it came along, yeah, definitely. Now, obviously you're scratching, and obviously you've got your belt drive at that point. You've heard it on records. Are you getting to see it? Are you watching like tapes and VHS?
No, not really. No, like, so some people, me and Dan do the podcast, the Scratch Calf podcast. So obviously we talk to a lot of turntablists, and they listen to hip hop, and it seems that they were drawn to the scratching as an art form on top of the record. So they were searching out what these noises were. I was like, oh, well, this is rave music. There's the like in rave music, the scratching was like a cherry on top. The scratching was like a dick swing. Everybody else, everybody else could like mix and beat match, but you know, you'd have Hype and you'd have DJ Psy and I watched the other guy. I always forget names, but there was the three big scratchers, and Psy and Hype were one of them, and they were like the guys. They were dick swinging, and I'm always like, well, I kind of need to be better than everybody, so like the scratching was kind of like, oh, I like it on top, but I don't just want to beat match. I want to be able to do my own thing. So I play bass and guitar anyway. So it was kind of, I want to add something musical over the top. So I was less searching out the sort of DMC tapes than the scratching tapes, and more attempting to emulate what was happening on these rave tapes that I was listening to. And that was like the slow mix and the sort of creating an hour sort of energy dance thingamy bobby wobby, if you know what I'm saying.
And how did that then sort of transpire into sort of getting out there and sort of doing gigs? You know, did there come a point where you got booked, or did you sort of get yourself onto a lineup or something?
There was a couple of youth clubs, and I was there at the youth clubs, like DJing, because I turned up at these youth clubs and the turntables were there, and I was like, I can do this. So you just jump on them and do it, and then you get offered some gigs, did some gigs, and then I remember I ended up. Mike Hind was the first person to put me on at Lakota. Actually, I think I was 18 when I went when I first played my set, and Mike Hind put me on at Lakota for Feverish, I think, and I played Hard House. And I think Anne Savage was in the main room and I was in the second room. And yeah, that was my first gig. I just happened upon Dan and Matt Avery, who were Mike Hind's cousins. And yeah, it just, you know, it's like anything in it. If you're out and about, you're in and you do it. It's because I played guitar and I played drums and I played bass. The sort of the concept of band and my dad doing gigs. The sort of it was always like you do music and then you do music in front of other people. So it was less a cognitive decision to go and play, and it was more, I was out, I can do it. Then if somebody goes, do you want to do this in front of people? It's like, well, I suppose that's the next thing I need to do then, isn't it? So yeah, that was kind of the thing with it.
And so obviously Lakota, again, another great club, which I know well. Yeah, I went to that again around that sort of time. So it's a killer club. Now, how did that progress then? Did obviously doing the first gigs, you met more people and then did more gigs? And are you sort of sticking to the sort of Bristol area, or are you moving out?
It was more, I had more access to drugs and I had more access to free drugs, and I took loads of drugs and just ended up doing things where drugs were, unfortunately.
Yeah.
There was, I mean, I kind of like now I'm quite precise in what I do and my choices and where I perform, and there's always a sort of game plan as to what I'm doing. But back then it was just, I'm just escaping from this really in pain little boy, and the fastest way to escape it was with music and drugs. And I went wherever the drugs were, and it just so happened that people taking the drugs really liked my DJing, and they asked me to play. You know, I don't think I've ever asked for a set in my life. People ask me to do it for that reason. I think I'm just quite pure. I mean, I come across probably quite pure and quite real, but really I was just a scared lad just trying to take drugs to fit in and try and cover up all the agony I was in, basically. And it just kind of, yeah, it just really, or you know, people like to use, but organic growth nowadays with their social media. Well, I had organic, quite negative growth in the early 2000s.
Yeah, and obviously, you know, the nightlife scene and festivals and events like that, you know, like you say, are heavily orientated into drugs, and you sort of got into that. To what extent did that sort of take over your life?
Music as a whole ruled my life anyway. There was nothing else. There never has been anything else. If I'm really honest, you know, music is the main thing, and it always has been, and it's always been that sort of comfort blanket. You know, people have got their little blankies when they're a kid, but you know, I was listening to things as my comfort blankie. So it kind of was that anyway. It was an escape from the sort of torment, and it was an escape from agony and anguish. And those gigs, they allowed me to expel a sort of evil spirit in me. And I'd spend the week getting more and more tense, and then it would be the weekend and I'd play a set and I'd just get rid of fucking everything. You know, it is like, I didn't know about it then, but flow state is something that you achieve when you suffer anxiety, you do physical exertion, and you do something creative that makes you concentrate. You add cocaine or pills or whatever else was put in my system at that point. Suddenly I'd be in flow state, and then suddenly I'd be in this meditative flow state where I was concentrating, I was scared. There was also this really quite heavy vibe between the people in the room and you. And then there was obviously the real sort of self-deprecating hatred I had for myself, but also really quite inflated ego that I had, where I hated myself so much I didn't think anybody could like me, but I knew they'd like me because of my DJ skills. So there was kind of strange amalgamation where my addictive personality, my inflated ego, my low self-esteem, and this direct hatred for myself. In that hour I do, or however many of those hours I do over the weekend, I just slowly be letting out some of the steam in that pressure cooker that had been built up since I was like a child. So yeah, it's a really strange thing for me, the whole performance and music and DJing and things like that.
I mean, we talk about it a lot on this show. You know, what we do on here is streaming. It's like almost like music therapy, because for that hour, 2 hours, whatever, you're just concentrating on what you're doing, and almost like the rest of the world doesn't exist. And like you say, you're slowly letting off steam from the tensions that have been building up from the week. And then I guess at the end of the weekend, you're back into the next week, and then it just becomes a regular rotating thing. And I guess it's the same with the drugs, isn't it? You know, it's just a constant weekend thing.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it was every day for me. The moment I discovered them, it is every day. Yeah.
And what were you using? You mentioned obviously heroin addiction.
Everything.
Okay.
You name, yeah, anything that was there, I'd take. Obviously, heroin was the favorite because it's the cure for everything apart from a decent life. So, you know, so that was there, but it was everything on top. But you name it. You know, I was nailing a bottle of vodka a day just for fun. You know, I was nailing like 2-3 grams of ketamine, like 20. If it was there, it would get consumed by me, with no fear of risk or death or whatever. Basically.
Was it part of it because the people around you were also sort of heavily into drugs, that you didn't have people saying to you, what are you doing? You know, you need to stop or anything like that?
Well, no. So my mum died when I was 20.
Right.
So, you know, my mum was the sort of linchpin of the entire family. And then when my mum died, my stepdad, who was a sort of the constant sort of, you know, voice of reason, was devastated. My brother, who was also a voice of reason, was devastated. My sister, also another sort of staple in my life, was also devastated. So we all just became fractured. I use the term hatred of people. I don't hate people, but I feel a hatred for social situations. You know, so my drug use wasn't around people. There was nobody involved in my drug use. I used to get drugs and I'd go and take them by myself because I didn't like being around people, because I hated myself so much. And just, yeah, it was a whole thing. So yeah, there was no other people influencing me. I just did what the fuck I want when I wanted, and most of the time it was either performing or just taking a lot of things by myself, basically. Unless there was a woman that was also on a similar destructive path, and she joined me for a few years until it either became too much or it was unbearable to be around.
Well, I mean, you say about it getting too much. I think in one of your messages, when you told me about obviously the things you wanted to talk about, you said one of the things is that you were pronounced dead. I think twice you said.
I died twice, yeah.
So
yeah.
How did that come about, and what was the impact of that?
Well, there was nobody knew about it. Well, I tried to take my life on multiple occasions, but I wasn't very good at it. One time I was successful, but I was found and they brought me back. The other time my liver just packed up, and then I ended up in hospital. I was working. I spoke to my work 4 days after. Like, where have you been? Oh, I fell off my bike. I couldn't get on a phone, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, it was, you know, we were all suffering in our own way. I was trying to kill myself with drugs. My brother threw himself into work, and my sister was up north, and my stepdad had lost the love of his life. So yeah, there was no... I'd go missing. I was a loner. So, you know, I could go missing for 4 days. Nobody would know. I could go and die in hospital and come back out, and I'd be playing that weekend. It'd be no different at all. When I died that time in hospital, I got a mate to sneak in some clothes that didn't give a fuck, and I was off. It was in French hospital. There was a social club, so I had some clothes. So I was in there with my liver failed green, and I was sneaking out when I went for a fag for a beer in hospital with liver failed. So it was just fucking madness.
I mean, obviously you're sober now.
Yeah.
Looking back, you know, what was it, do you think, that, you know, having been obviously in hospital, you know, pronounced dead, that you were just like, you know, fuck it, I'm just going to carry on? You know, what was it, do you think, that just didn't make you just stop and think, right, this is enough?
Well, I was actively trying to die.
Okay.
Yeah, I was actively trying to die. You know, my mum was gone. I hated myself anyway. So it was just actively like, well, you know, I've tried to kill myself. I'm not very good at killing myself. So I'll just do it. I'll do it the way I know how, and that's by fucking my body up. And I just couldn't do it, basically. I've got like tiger blood, as Charlie Sheen would say. It was just, I was indestructible back then, and actively didn't want to be here. And I was actively attempting to do it until I accidentally had a child. And then it was like, oh shit, I got a child, and then within 2 weeks, I'd done a cold turkey on all of those, including loads of sleeping pills and antidepressants the doctor were giving me. 2 weeks, I cold turkeyed off all of it, and I was working a sales job at Trade It, and then shit got real. That's when the real pain happened. But yeah, I've got a son now, and that's when it was like, oh shit, no, you can't want to die now, because there's something that depends on you. And my dad struggled with alcohol and substances. I come from a long line of alcoholics and addicts anyway, you know, so you know they probably influence each other, but you know, my I couldn't pass that on to my son, so I had to sort myself out, and that's when the real battle happened. That's when the real sort of, oh shit, you have got a problem, start discovering your problem happened, you know. And that was 13 years ago, and I was sort of living in that mire of pain and torment, and just trying to work out why I couldn't keep myself away from it until a year ago, because I'm celebrating a year clean and sober now on Thursday. So yeah, it's been a good 20-year slog, basically.
I mean, yeah, firstly, congratulations. You know,
Thank you.
a year is incredible, and hopefully it will just carry on. Obviously, you know, it took you that long, and obviously it's been a year since you've been sober. So what did you do to actually come off it, and what has been effective in the last year?
So I'll go back. So when I had my son, I tried to stay away with willpower, but I don't know anybody that's been through addiction. It's actually harder to be sober than it is to take the drugs, as long as you don't give a fuck about how unmanageable your life is, and as long as there aren't people around you're hurting. Of course you are. I did a rehab, and then in my mind it was like, right, well, you're off the opiates now, because within the sort of 3 years from my son being born to going into the rehab, I was like sort of getting caught, pulling myself back out, getting caught, pulling myself back out. And then it was just got too much, and I went into a rehab, and in my brain it was like that rehab was sort of, that was getting me off the opiates. So I got cleared from the opiates, and the people in the rehab told me, oh, you know, you can't, there's no way you can ever use or take another substance again, because it will ruin your life. And I was like, well, no, you can't tell me that. Who the fuck are you to tell me that? I do what I want. So I told them the moment I come out of that rehab, I'll smoke some crack and I'll have a beer and I'll go to bed. And that's not going to happen to me. But what did happen is I slowly fell back into those habits, but with drugs that weren't heroin over the next 10 years. I just fell into a sort of ketamine and a really negative relationship with substances. You know, I built a job, I had a fiance, I built a life, I built a business, and the only thing that would stop me from taking drugs was, you know, my son losing my business, not being able to pay the rent and everything. So if I took ketamine and cocaine, you can't work on ketamine, and cocaine tweaks me out. It makes you feel like you're coming off heroin to me. So I'd need the ketamine to do that. So the two would only exist together, and the two could only exist together at a perfect time. And that perfect time would happen once every 3 days. Or if I didn't have anything to do, and if I'd earned enough money for, you know, the month in, and I just take the drugs until I need to earn some money again. So, you know, it was kind of, I was in this sort of misery of absolute like torment, and sort of like just constantly thinking about drugs, just not being present with anybody, but then living in misery for 3 days. And then just I used to call them brain holidays. I used to explain to people that, you know, like the blinkers on horses, like the longer I'd go without it, the closer the blinkers would go to my eyes, and the more tunnel vision I'd be on misery. So yeah, that was it. And then I had 4 strokes in 2024, and
Wow.
yeah, and then just where all of my mechanisms to stay away from drugs were taken away, because I was recovering from a stroke. I was just banging drugs every day, just sat on my couch recovering from a stroke, taking drugs every day. And then I reached for the phone out to try and get heroin. Nobody picked up, didn't do it. I was like, fuck, I've done it. It's taken me like sort of 10 years, but I've reached for heroin. And I called my brother up. I was like, look, I've reached for heroin, Dan, I'm fucked. And I went to a CA meeting that evening. And that was the journey that led me to that year, basically.
Okay, so you got to the point where you realized that, after 10 years, that was the first time that heroin had called for you, and you realized that
Yeah.
that was definitely had to be the point of almost no return.
Yeah, in my brain, it was the heroin that was the problem. Even though I knew that I struggled with drugs, but I'm a fucking hard nut. I grit my teeth and get through it. Nobody tells me what to do. But the moment I reached for the moment I tried to get it, that was like, fuck, that's a problem. Grass yourself up, take this seriously. And yeah.
And so how did that go? You ended up in Narcotics Anonymous, or
CA? It was Cocaine Anonymous. I went to.
Okay.
Yeah.
How was that? Was that very difficult going?
You have to be honest, and you have to allow your bullshit to be called. And you've got to drop your ego, and you basically, the process of a 12-step program, it breaks you down, and it makes you face all of the shit you've been running away from, and you either do it or you don't, and there's no in between. And I did it. I was lucky enough to have the awareness to know that if you need a sponsor, you need somebody to take you through it. And I took a bit of time just trying to find somebody that I could communicate with, and was hard enough on me to call me on my bullshit and wouldn't suddenly find my prestige in the music scene and look up to it and let me get away with bullshit. I found somebody that wouldn't let me fucking get away with anything, wouldn't let me, would just tell me how it is. And that person turned out to be an absolutely amazing person that gave me everything he had and took me through those steps and broke myself down, and I faced it, and I was fucking honest. Yeah, and I kind of needed it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, because obviously you've described that, the connection and the family that perhaps would have been there had your mum sadly not passed at that time. You needed someone to be able to come in and be honest with you.
When you struggle with drugs, and when you struggle with the things I've struggled with, you ask people to help you all the time, but most people don't know where to fucking start.
Yeah.
When you've hated yourself since you were my earliest memories of feeling like my skin, like I wasn't comfortable I've never been comfortable in my skin, and only recently I've felt what it's like to be comfortable in my skin. When you're asking for help from people that don't understand that, they can't help you. So as a person that's asking for help, you ask for help all the time. People are like, yeah, I love you. You're a great person. I'm going to help you. And when it gets real, they don't know how to help you. So they duck out. But this was the first time I actually said, and at the age of 41, asking another man to help you that you don't know is an incredibly scary thing to do. And I asked that man to help me, and he fucking did. And he knew it because he suffered with what I suffered with. And he helped me. And he was the first man to ever actually be able to help me. So, just that person turning up, and just that person not ducking out at me, and just that person taking my shit and being there when I call was enough to show me that actually I can be helped. And then suddenly the years of just feeling hopeless and alone was suddenly removed, and then the work could begin. But then, it's quite a complicated thing, and you have to need to do it to be able to do it. So, the whole 12-step program thing is quite a complicated thing. And, for me to be talking about it now probably doesn't shine the correct light on it, which, why people tend not to advertise they do that. But, it's part of my story, so I do have to talk about it. Don't listen to me about the 12-step program, because everybody works the 12 steps differently, and everybody meets a different person. It goes a different way. But for me personally, those were the really important things of this process that really helped me through it. And yeah, I was just desperate. I was broken, man. Yeah, that was it. I mean, if I hadn't had that stroke, would I be talking like this now? Probably not. No, I'd still be banging drugs, doing what I was doing, because it was working for me with the understanding of my hatred. Do you see what I mean? It's relative, isn't it? It's like, if you're used to getting punched in the face all of the time, a punch in the face doesn't really hurt.
Yeah.
It's just day to day. If you're used to getting slapped in the face, or if you're used to hugs every day and you get punched in your face, you're like, oh, fuck, I've been punched in the face. Life ruined. I was getting punched in the face every time I woke up. I was going to sleep every night fucking wishing I didn't wake up, even though I had a fiance, I had a business, I had outward success. People would look at my life and go, oh, that guy's doing amazing. But on reality, I went inside, I wasn't. So, these punches in the face to me were just normal. A punch in the face to me was nothing. It was like, a hug was like, why are you hugging me? People used to love me. It was like, I'd look at them like they were idiots. It's like, how could you love me? You must be fucking thick if you love me. And that was the world I lived in. So everything was valueless. The reason I said that is because the way I'm describing a 12-step program now isn't the reality of it to somebody else, but it's my reality now. So if you do struggle with an addiction like I do, then you need to go in there not listening to the words that come out of my mouth, and go in there looking out for the words that come out of yours, and you find your associations, you find the person that you trust, and you work your program that way. I hope I've made sense.
Yeah, of course. It's finding that one person that's going to help you. It's probably the wrong word, but like something like a guiding angel that's going to be there, and like you say, is going to be there when you need them, when you pick up the phone and you're feeling low and you're thinking about it.
That's what it's about. Yeah,
you've got to have someone at the end of the phone who's going to listen to you.
Yeah, exactly. But also be strong enough to tell you when you're chatting shit, because
Yeah.
people with my illness chat shit a lot, because we live in a delusion of ego and prestige and judgment on other people. When I was in that, I'd chat a lot of fucking shit, and a lot of the stuff that went on in my head was absolute bollocks. And it's having somebody that can relate to that and go, you're chatting shit, you probably need to look at this. You probably need to take these actions because you're chatting absolute shit. And if you're open-minded enough to trust that person when they tell you you're chatting shit, to address it, then you'll kind of get there. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. But again, congratulations on a year.
Thank you. Thank
you. I guess it must be good now to be able to look back at it and think, that I have achieved something. I've moved on. You're still DJing, you're still out and about. Obviously, there's still alcohol, drugs, and all the rest of it still out there. How do you cope with that now? Obviously, being a year sober, are you able just to simply say, no, thank you, not interested, or do you keep yourself away from it? How does it work?
My soul is clean. I'm starting to love myself. I can say I love myself. I can look at myself in the mirror and go, you're actually a decent bloke. I use drugs and alcohol to solve an issue I had in my head. So I've got a very logistical brain, and there isn't a logical situation. As long as I keep myself spiritually sound, as long as I eat well, as long as I pursue my loves, and as long as I walk into this world with love and care for everybody, and more importantly, as long as I address these little twists of my brain that come up, I don't need or want that. It's irrelevant, man. People go, oh yeah, I really love music. Oh, I love going out listening to music, and I love drinking and taking drugs listening to music. Well, if you're looking purely at listening to music, the worst possible place to listen to music is in a loud venue. The worst possible thing to do when you listen to music is to take mind-altering substances, because they dull your senses, they dull your ears, and they make you easily susceptible to very cheap chord changes and grooves. So I obsess over groove, man. I'll listen to records, and I'll hear really tiny things, and I'll listen on expensive styluses through detailed speakers, and I'll be like, fuck, and I'll pick up a guitar and I'll play a chord, and I'll have a favorite chord that day, and I'll play it, and my heart will fucking bleed with love for that sound and the vibration that comes off that guitar. What the fuck do I need drugs for? It's already there, I already get that feeling from music anyway. I'm a music person, man. Live venues aren't the place. Live venues are a place to be and feel vibes from other people and drink and have fun. I don't like fun. I like music.
Fair enough. Thank you. You've been very honest. You've been very open, and when we spoke about you being on the show, you said you would be, and would go deep, and I really appreciate everything you said, and that's great. And I hope a lot of people are going to take something from the show. Music is a big passion, so let's talk a little bit about the things you're doing sort of now. Obviously, one of the ways connected is the Scratch Cafe. So how did that come about? How does that work? And if people want to get involved, what do they do?
So the Scratch Cafe is a monthly thing we do at Lost Horizon. It's the second Wednesday of every month between 6 and 10. In lockdown, I started turntablism, that thing that maybe should have happened in the 90s. I started seeing the turntablists go. I've known a number of turntablists for a while, and I suddenly just like, well, I want to do it. I just suddenly my brain just went ding, right, this is what you need to do, you're going to do it. So I started doing it, and obviously jumped on Facebook, turntablist performance groups, looking at all these guys going, and Dan just kept popping up, and I got a good vibe about him. I liked his style, he was really good. I kind of knew Jimmy Needles in between them, and then Jimmy was doing this scratch jam at his house, and I was never able to make it, but Dan would always go, and there would always be that, yeah, okay, we've got to make it, never made it. And then I just kept seeing Dan. I dropped him a couple of messages, but obviously, Dan's a busy guy, and he probably didn't take my initial messages seriously, because I was just going, no, hello, blah, blah, blah. I'm this person who puts videos online. Hello, other person that puts videos online. So it was just weirder. And then there was a situation where he suddenly just saw what I was doing and was like, okay, this guy, he's probably started seeing me in the same light I saw him. And I just spoke to him one day and I was like, you know, do you want to put a scratch jam on? And we didn't even know each other. And he was just like, yeah, let's do it. He's like, how's it going to work? It's like, well, my workshop's at the Collector Cave record shop, the cloak's above it. I've already arranged for us to have the space for free. I've got a load of turntables. My mate Tim's got a load of mixers. Do you want to do it with me? And he was like, yeah, 100%. We just did it. We just did it because we just wanted to scratch and get better. And we didn't really care if anybody turned up. I remember us joking. It's like, we were like, what if nobody turns up? It's like, and then Dan turned around to me and I think he said, well, we'll have 8 turntables to ourselves for 4 hours. I was like, fucking yeah. And then unfortunately, loads of people did fucking turn up, and they've been turning up for 2 years, and I very rarely get to scratch there.
So, yeah. But, you know, it's one of those things, and I've seen it with what I do, you know, if you build something that you're into, eventually you're going to find other people that are into it. You're going to find your tribe, and then they're going to be into what you're doing. And like you say, it's great to see it growing. Like you said, 2 years now. And on top of that, we'll talk about that now. Unstoppable DJ Battle, you know, that's sort of fed off the back of the success and the community that you'd built up on Scratch Cafe, and then you did something completely different. So tell us about that.
So that was a really funny thing. You know, when we started the Scratch Cup, people started turning up. Dan, being a competing DMC DJ, was like, oh, it would be good to have a battle. I didn't really have much interest in battling per se. My interest is more in sharpening my skills and just having a laugh now. You know, the competition in me's gone now, really. I don't go into situations wanting to be betting anybody. I just want to better myself every day. But Dan was like, oh, wow, imagine if we did a battle. And then I was like, yeah, it'd be fucking cool. It'd be good fun. I like the chaos of it. I like causing trouble. I like, you know, like weird things happening. So yeah, I'm in. And then we did a podcast, and Maya was friends with one of the guys, Paul DJ Goldsmith. He's friends with him, and he knew about us. Dan and Maya competed together and chatted, and then we started doing the Scratch podcast. And Random jumped on, and Random was like gracious enough to just support us from the start, basically. Did the podcast, everybody liked it. Loads of like sort of well-known DJs were enjoying it. And then we suddenly just had a reputation straight away where people would jump on it. Maya Lloyd, DJ XL, came on the podcast, and he was like, oh, really wanted to do a battle for ages, explained it. And on the podcast, I went, we'll do it. What do you mean? Well, we've got a venue, we've got a good relationship, we've got loads of turntables, been doing this for 2 years, let's do it. Maya was like, I'm in an hour, and Dan was like, yeah, I'm up for it. Like, I didn't even speak to Dan. It was lit. You can watch it on the podcast. It's just me going, yeah, I'll do it. Yeah, come on then. Maya said he's up for talking about it. 2 weeks later, he said, let's do it. And that was it, basically.
If it's a good idea, it's going to work. And like I said, it's just getting one other person or 2 other people involved who think the idea is great, run it, and just see what happens. So obviously, it's not exactly like the DMCs. So tell us a little bit about the different aspects of it that sort of make it stand out compared to other sort of scratch competitions.
Does it stand out to other scratch competitions? I'm not sure it does. I think it's different, and I think it's something that nobody else has ever done before. The format of it, nobody else has ever done before. The format of it is more based on the crowd having a good time and the DJs having a good time, instead of that sort of static up on stage, you can't see anything. You know, the concept, you know, Maya from the start was like, you know, he's one of the most beautiful people ever. His brain is just like, I can normally predict what most people are going to do next, but you fucking no chance. You'd never be able to predict what Maya's thinking or he's going to do next. And he just came up with this great concept where it's a winner stays on, and anybody could win. And really cleverly for him, like, you know, the person who's first on could win it. And because he's so battled hard and he understands the concept of a DJ warming up is so important. If you're going on cold and trying to do 6 minutes, you'll know if you do a long set, your first few mixes are ass.
Yeah,
because it takes, you know, you're the middle of the set to the end is when you really get on fire. So Maya was clever enough to know, right, well, the first guy on, if he can get through to win the first one, he's warmed up and he's got the crowd behind him. So then you get this inertia, whereas like the DMCs is just technical, it's well grounded, and it's this cornerstone of everything we do now. But they're about routine, bang, judges. But the Unstoppable was more about the crowd participation. The winner stays on, that electric energy. We had the decks in the crowd, you know, so everybody was just piled in trying to see it. So yeah, it's just we don't necessarily stand out, but we're different and we're more crowd focused, maybe. But then I was just basically the nuts and bolts tech person. The real visionary is Dan and Maya, so I'm really the wrong person to give that opinion and don't listen to a word I've just said, basically.
But again, you've achieved something. I've spoken to Dan about it. I've also spoken to Swanee, who came down and they did the filming and interviews and all of that stuff. And it's about creating an event. What we're dealing with, if you're putting on anything, is you've got to get people out of their house, off the sofa, off Netflix, off their cheap beer or whatever they're into. And by creating something different, by creating something interactive, people get involved and it becomes this much greater thing. But obviously we'll see. Hopefully there'll be another one that I can make.
We're aiming for it. We're aiming for it.
Yeah, definitely. And it'll be good. And obviously Bristol's, fantastic and it's great and it looked brilliant. You've talked about the podcast a little bit. How did that come about and how long have you been doing it? And have there been any particular highlights?
The moment Facebook Live started, I had a gig. We're talking about sort of 10 years. Was it 10, 11 years ago when Facebook Live started? I was playing at Lakota at Dot to Dot Festival. And I bought a burner phone and I put 60 quid worth of data on it. And I set it up next to my decks and I live streamed my DJ set 2 days after you could go live on Facebook. So I think I was one of the first DJs to actually do a live set. So the moment you were able to go live, I was like, fucking podcast. So I'd basically been doing podcasts for like 8 years, live podcasts for like 8 years on Facebook. It's a natural thing to do. Like random have been in contact and like I wanted to do a podcast because I just love talking to people and I love expressing ideas and I love a conversation being captured and there forever to either fear watching or go back to look at what you were like back then. Dan was like really resilient towards the podcast at the beginning because it's obviously quite time consuming with the editing, everything. But I was like, damn, I need to do. And then I was like chatting to Rand and we were chatting shit online and all. And, like Rand is like one of my favorite people in the world now. But, I think we got on straight away. And then one day I just went, random, want to be on the podcast? He was like, what's that? I went, we haven't done it yet. Do you want to just do it? He was like, yeah. So then I was like, Dan, random's going to do the first podcast. And he was like, what? I went, yeah. And I was like, should we do it this date? He was like, I've never done a podcast before. I don't even listen to him. I was like, well, we just get StreamYard and do it. I've got the mics. We just chat for 2 hours. He was like, yeah. And then we just did it, basically. I love that podcast because he's kind of like, I'm quite ignorant to the DMC and turntablist scene. And I've just been using it as a sort of, doing something productive, but learning about the scene, speaking to the baddest motherfuckers in the world. And so every episode is my favorite because every episode something happens I've got no idea about.
Yeah, and it's certainly something I've learned from doing all of these shows and some other shows. It's just about the conversation. You don't know necessarily where it's going to go. You don't know what stories you're going to hear. It's getting to know that other person really well, which most times it then goes on for me meeting the people in real life. I'm sure at some point further down that I will meet in person. But it's great just to connect and just get an idea and get a bit of energy.
Do you know what I like about the Scratch Calf podcast is you get to see it through the eyes of that person.
Yeah.
The really magical thing about hip hop and turntablism, especially in the UK, is something weird happened in the 80s to the early 90s and hip hop exploded all around the world. But the UK went, we love hip hop. We absolutely love hip hop. And then the early 90s, they went, no, it's all rave. And hip hop disappeared. The rest of the world, right? Hip hop's massive, but in the UK, not so much. It's all drum and bass and 140 and dubstep, and all the kids aren't really listening to hip hop; they're listening to that. So there was this real magical thing that happened where these like real hard-headed, talented, like 0.01 percenters continued manipulating records with their hands. Even though there was no money in it, there was no future in it, basically. And we get to see the 80s into the 90s, and it's the culmination of all of that stuff happened through their eyes. And that's the really beautiful thing, because most people in life, they don't get to understand something through somebody else's perspective, and it's quite a hard thing to do. So being able to question and talk about these people and just see what it was like for them is absolutely like beautiful for me. And it's
like you say, it's a snapshot, it's an archive of a conversation. But also what I find is you'll ask something and then you can see their brain ticking, thinking, Oh yeah, and then they come up with a story and they think of something that they might not have thought of for like 20 years, or it's a memory
Yeah.
or a person or someone that was in their life. And that's what I love seeing most, just the neurons firing and
Mm.
your brain saying, oh, I remember something that happened, 20 years ago, and this
Yeah.
person was there, and that it's that's what I really enjoy doing them. Right, we've been talking for a little while. We're almost getting towards the end of the show. One of the things I always do is I
Yeah.
ask guests to check out 3 uplifting songs. It's something that Mark
Yeah.
Lancaster asked on the very first show we did back like 5 years ago now, and he asked the guests what 45s lift your spirits. Now, obviously, I know I can see some 45s behind you, but I'm not sure the records necessarily you picked out are 45s available. I think they might be. But let's talk through the 3 records that you've chosen and why. So what's the first one you chose and why is that?
The first one I chose was my mother's son-in-law, Billie Holiday. Ever since I discovered Billie Holiday, I heard that big band dance and I was like, whoa, wait, when was that made? And I could hear everything I was dancing to there. There was no kick drum and the bass wasn't as big and, the sound quality wasn't there. But everything that I was dancing to existed in those records. I could hear a pain through Billie Holiday's voice that I had. I could hear grooves in there that were echoed into the music I was listening to. And I was like, fuck, that's the source. That's the source of what I'm dancing to. And it's just so special. And then hearing like her voice, that pain, she was a heroin addict. Idiot sees idiot. Do you know what I mean? And I was like, fucking, there's another idiot there. And she's singing to me and I can feel the pattern. It was just, yeah, it's just, that is just, in my opinion, I think obviously the blues, all the blues stuff, yeah, that is kind of the start of dance music. And that was really where dance music spurred off past sort of native African drums and those tribal sort of grooves. But in modern sort of Western culture, that is where dance started. And those early records, where instead of like sitting down in an opera house, like with glasses on or whatever they did, or doing the waltz, this was where free form sort of lose your shit dancing existed in dance halls. So yeah, that song or just that era of jazz, and especially Billie Holiday, is just a staple in my existence ever since I discovered it and found the story behind it.
That's an incredible song. So you got 2 more. Which is the second
Yes.
one you chose?
So GTO, what was the name of it? I can't remember. I don't read records.
I think it's Gangster Tune Industry.
So it's Gangster Tunes Industry
Sweet and
number 3,
Fast.
but yeah. So that is just, it's the most psychotic, lunatic tune ever, and I've got this real like sort of, I get this boner for things that are like hard but soft at the same time. And that tune, when you listen to it, it's really fast and nasty. The rhythm's evil, it's a big distorted kick drums, but it's really fucking cheesy. And like, with drum and bass, it's like you've got the slow reggae style bass lines, but mental 165 BPM Amons. There's the 2 exist together, mentalness and slow groove. So like that encompasses that for me, because it's just fucking lose your shit, mindless mentalness, but really cheesy on top. So yeah, it's just whenever I need to like get rid of some demons, that motherfucker goes on. And yeah.
Number 3 then. What have you got for number 3? The last
What
one.
is it? Sorry, this is a new one. Like, I don't read records. I just listen
Invisible
to...
Man Band, I think you sent me. All
Right,
Night Thing.
That's it, All Night Thing. I chose this one because I sort of thought, yeah, I need 2 like historical like staples of my life, and then the sort of look into what I'm doing now. And since getting sober, I think I went into detail about how undetailed you are when you're taking drugs or when you're out listening to it. And like the more sober I become, the more detailed I'm noticing. I'm a bass player anyway. I play drums and bass. Rhythm to me has always been a very special thing. But I feel like I was like like a toddler draws a teacup. It kind of looks like a teacup, but it's not a teacup, and you wouldn't drink out of it if it was in real life. Like, I kind of saw groove like a toddler drew a teacup, and the more sober I'm getting, the more detail I'm seeing. And I'm just going through all these old funk records and soul and disco records I've been listening to, just fucking getting obsessed by like when the band are settling. When the band first come in, they're just settling down, but there's these like really intricate little changes. And then further on in the record, you've got that same groove, but the band are in the pocket. And that's how the groove was supposed to be. So like, I'm just like, when the first groove hits on that tune, The bassist is a little bit lazy. The guitarist is a little bit excited. The drummer's sort of settled in because he's been going for a while. But that magical push pulls there. Then it breaks down, and then suddenly it just the chord sequence changes, and it's fucking uplifting. The band are a little bit better. And then you get into it, and then they're in the fucking pocket. And I'm just like forensically taking apart these records at the moment, just dissolving in the masters of fucking groove and funk and timing, basically. And that when you asked me, that is the tune that had been stuck in my head for like 4 days, just revolving.
It's been amazing. Thank you again for your honesty. Thank you for being so open. Congratulations again. It will be up on YouTube and people can listen back on a really interesting story. And as Ed Bond, who's been a guest on, was earlier in, he was saying it's a very powerful show tonight. So thank you so much. I'm sure people will get a lot from what you said. Scratch Cafe soon, and then hopefully another Unstoppable DJ battle, and whatever else comes your way. I hope everything really goes well with the podcast as well.
Wonderful, yeah. And absolute blessing. Thank you so much for giving me a voice on your wonderful Twitch platform.
Thanks for everyone for tuning in, and good night.
Cheers, guys.